Okay, time is 8:05. I want to thank everybody for joining us on Zoom this evening for a special series of preparing for Pesach. This is the second series. My name is Rabbi Elef. I'm Director of Community Relations here at OU Kosher, and it's my pleasure to be able to moderate tonight's proceedings. We have a very special presentation lined up. Last week we discussed some of the ingredients and shopping for food products. Today we have the privilege of hearing from Rabbi Moshe Elefant Shlita, who is the Chief Operating Officer and Executive Rabbinic Coordinator of OU Kosher, who will be answering many questions and answers that have already been sent in, specifically with regards to questions that might be unique for this year, especially with regards to medications and the like, as well as the Seder and other Pesach questions that come up as well. We do have numerous questions that have been sent in. For today's presentation, we will go through those that have been sent in first. Afterwards, please feel free to use the chat function to send me any questions, and if we have additional time, we'll be glad to ask Rabbi Elefant those questions as well. After Rabbi Elefant's presentation, we are privileged to have Rabbi Chaim Schwartz, Executive Vice President of the Vaad of Queens, who live from his kitchen in Kew Gardens, New York, will be showing you exactly how to kosher your kitchen. So, I want to welcome Rabbi Elefant, again, the Chief Operating Officer of OU Kosher. And Rabbi Elefant, welcome, and thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Rabbi Elef. I'm so impressed that you and your wife are able to give to Klal Yisrael tonight, Erev Pesach, and especially in such a time of Erev Pesach, the availability to be able to help people get ready for Yontif. Kol hakavod, you should be gebenched.
Thank you. We'll basically just jump into the questions that have come about Pesach. I just want to know if you had any ha'aris or things you wanted to point out to start with.
Well, how can we not think about Pesach this year in its a very unique manner under the environment that we live? We live under this cloud of the COVID, of the coronavirus. And I think that we should be thinking this year Pesach as maybe the first time in many years a remembrance we will really feel what it felt like that year in Mitzrayim, where Klal Yisrael had just, not Klal Yisrael, but the Egyptians had just suffered the 10 makas. And many times I think to myself, the makas are so incredibly hard to fathom. How an entire country could be only getting blood or frogs or all the other makas we're going to be speaking about by the Seder Mitzvah next week. And now I think we could start to realize not just a country, but that entire world could be afflicted by a megefa, could be afflicted by this pandemic. So we see that it is able to be understood that you could have some sort of a pandemic that affects every single person in the entire world. So if there was a pandemic that only affected the people in Egypt, that's nothing compared to what a pandemic that's so worldwide represents. But we also know that at that time, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as easily as he turned on the makas, turned off the makas. So my thinking is that as quickly and as how horribly and terribly we all just woke up to a world of this pandemic, we could wake up to a world that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will take away this pandemic. And Chodesh Nisan, the month of Nisan that we just began last Thursday, is the month of Yeshuas. It's the month of Nisan. And certainly Pesach, starting as we get every day closer to Pesach, it was the time that we celebrated and enjoyed incredible miracles. So we should hopefully have B'yom Mahain Bazman Hazeh. Just like in those days there were great miracles, we should enjoy great miracles immediately and enjoy from that the miracle of freedom, and not just freedom in the spiritual sense that we should be able to do our mitzvahs, but freedom from this terrible sorrow, from this terrible issue that's facing us, that we should be able to have a real Simchas Yontif.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi Elefant. I just want to mention, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Rabbi Ilan Siegelman, the Rav of Kilas Terrace Tamima Kew Gardens Hills, who also helped spearhead and was a catalyst for making sure that the OU could present tonight as well. We'll jump into some of the questions, especially come up kashrus-related Leila Seder. Rabbi Elefant, would you be able to give us, people for a lot of times are making their first Seder haven't done it before. What would be the shear for each kos by the Seder of the Daled Kosos?
Okay, excellent question. And again, a lot of people are calling, and I'm sure, Rabbi Elef, you're getting these calls because this is a new experience for them, making their own Seder. I just told somebody this afternoon, I'm married quite a while, and the halacha discusses that if you don't have any children to ask you to manishtana, then your wife should ask you to manishtana. And I never experienced that. When we first got married, we went to my parents, to my in-laws, and then Baruch Hashem, we have children and grandchildren. But it looks like this year, we're going to be at the Seder, just my wife and I, and my wife is going to ask me to manishtana. And so this year's Seder is going to be, for all of us, or for many of us, or for most of us, a new experience. And for many of us, it's going to be the first time we're going to be making our own Seder. And there's nothing to be concerned about. Making your own Seder is a wonderful, wonderful experience. And of course, like Rabbi Elef correctly points out, the first mitzvah that we do as we begin the Seder on Pesach by night is the mitzvah of Kiddush and the mitzvah, the first of the 4 cups. So we're supposed to drink 4 cups of wine. There is a discussion about how large the cups have to be. The minimum amount is 3 fluid ounces, which is the opinion of Rabbi Chaim Schwartz. The maximum amount is the opinion of the Chazon Ish, which is approximately 5 ounces. Rabbi Moshe held it's 3.3 ounces as the minimum size. Rabbi Moshe felt that you could, for the first cup, you should use 4.4 ounces of wine. Also, for the first 3 cups, whatever of the amounts that you're going to use that we just identified you're using, you only have to drink half of that. So you have 3 ounces as the amount of wine you need to have. You only need to drink 1.5 ounces. So even if you're taking the big amount of the Chazon Ish of 5 ounces, you only need to drink 2.5 ounces. Besides, for the last cup of wine, you should drink the entire cup of wine. So again, to review, it's either 3.3 or 5 for the first cup, 4.4 or 5. For the first 3 cups, drink half the cup, and for the last cup, drink the entire cup.
Okay, so we'll get to, once we're talking about the kais, the question comes up a lot, and actually a couple of people just private message me as well. What's the story with wine versus grape juice? Does it have to have alcohol in it? What percentage of alcohol does it need to have in it? And people have also said they've heard about grape juice being diluted, and is that kosher for Daled Kosos? So I guess wine versus grape juice, what amount of alcohol does it need? And is there a difference between using grape juice and wine?
Okay, so let's respond to all of your questions because they're great questions. In terms of the question of wine versus grape juice, so wine comes with a preference. The reason why wine comes with a preference is because part of the reason, or one of the reasons, we drink 4 cups of wine by the Seder is to represent that we are showing that this is the night of freedom. This is the night that we're sitting at the Seder, representing that we are kings and princes, queens and princesses. And just like kings and queens drink wine to show their freedom, to show their royalty, it's appropriate to drink wine, if possible. Furthermore, if you can, when it says that you have to drink wine, I'm jumping to the other question, Rabbi Elef, there's nowhere is there any indication how much alcohol does wine need to have to be considered wine. So nowadays, where you have many of these wines available with very low alcohol, no one that I discussed this question ever would said no, that there's a minimum amount of alcohol that the wine has to be considered wine. If it has alcohol in it, it's wine. So if you could drink low alcohol wine, that would be perfectly fine. There also is a point, if at all possible, to try to use red wine during the Seder, unless you prefer for taste white wine. Then you could take white wine, what I usually recommend to people who prefer the white wines, they should add a drop of red wine, they should add a drop of grape juice, and then you'll have it red, so you'll have the right color. So again, a low alcohol wine is preferable. If wine is preferable, low alcohol wine is 100% fine. If, however, even that is an issue for you, so the purpose of the Seder is not to be a time of difficulty. Yes, there's a very famous Gemara. The Gemara says that there was a certain Tana who could not drink wine. Wine affected him badly, and he used to have a headache from Pesach till Shavuos from the wine that he drank at the Seder. That's probably because they didn't have low alcohol wine. It may be because this person was particularly sensitive. I don't think that's what the halacha requests of us. And therefore, if you're an individual who can't drink wine, the second best advice I could give you is to mix the wine with grape juice. Take grape juice and put some wine into your grape juice. If even that doesn't work for you, so then the third option I recommend is something called must. Must is grape juice, but it's not the regular grape juice that you buy in the store in the jar, in the glass container, in the glass bottle or in the plastic bottle, which is pasteurized. Because once you pasteurize grape juice, that grape juice can never be wine. The pasteurization retards the fermentation process. So that grape juice can never be wine. But if you have grape juice, which is must, which is pure grapes that were just squeezed and were not pasteurized, so you have to use it quickly, because since it's not pasteurized, it won't last long. But as long as it's still fresh, it's something that could turn into wine. It can ferment into wine. And since it can ferment into wine, the Gemara says, Adam eshkel anovim, a person could squeeze a cluster of grapes and use that for dalet kaisis, for the kiddush, for the dalet kaisis without a problem. So again, to review, best is to use wine, even low alcohol wine, makes no difference how little. If you can't do that, mix wine and grape juice. If you can't do that, use grape juice, which is must. If you can't find that or you can't drink that, then drink old-fashioned grape juice. But then, as you asked, Rabbi Elif, there are individuals that have an issue with drinking grape juice. Particularly, we get this question often from people who are diabetics, and the grape juice comes with a high level of sugar. So after spending time with the grape juice manufacturers, we have determined that if you take regular grape juice, you could still dilute it with a third water, and it still will be considered full-fledged grape juice. It will still be considered grape juice on which you can make a buttery priagofen. The only type of grape juice where I can't make that recommendation is the light grape juice, because the light grape juice is already diluted. So there, diluting it further may be an issue. But if you need to use grape juice and you need to dilute the grape juice, you may do so up to a third of water.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just going to interject over here that one of our chaverim at the OU has just been put onto a ventilator, so we'd like to dedicate tonight's thoughts and the Reitera learning to Zchus V'Shlema for Yitzchak Tzvi ben Rivka Tzvi L'Rfu Shlema.
Amen. A very special person.
As we continue going about the Seder, a little bit about matzah. There seems to be some confusion out there. Some people are adamant only to use machine matzah. Some are adamant only to use hand matzah. What's the difference between the two? Is there a kashrus difference? What should I be looking for?
Well, of course, there are everything when it comes to Pesach has to do with minhagim. Everything when we speak about Pesach has to do with customs. And I always tell people that they should follow their customs, because we know we're speaking and we're going to speak and we should speak about the different mitzvahs that we perform on the night of Pesach at the Seder. We spoke about the wine already. We're going to speak about the matzah. We're going to speak about many of the different mitzvahs that we perform at the Seder. But the most important mitzvah that we perform at the Seder is the mitzvah of the Vaad Harabonim, of transmitting to our children our traditions, of course, transmitting to them the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, the story of our exodus from Egypt. But it's not just that. It's really transmitting our rich tradition of what we follow generation after generation. And that's why I always like to believe that Pesach is such a holiday, is such a yontif of minhagim, of traditions, because nowhere is the V'Hagata Levincha, nowhere is the concept of transmitting our heritage to our children more evident than in the area of minhagim. And therefore, the question you ask, Rabbi Elef, is critical. What should you use for matzah? Matzah, there were some communities that only used hand matzah. Certainly, they only used hand matzah at the Seder, and they only used hand matzah for the duration of the Yontif. On the other hand, there were communities that used machine matzah. What's the difference? So, when you use machine matzah, there's obviously no human intervention. And whenever you have human intervention, what's the worst thing that could happen as you're baking matzahs? The worst thing that can happen as you're baking matzahs is to leave the dough unattended. Because any moment that the dough is left unattended, it could turn into chametz. So when you're dealing with humans, so it has to pass from one hand to the other hand, from one person to another person. All of those delays are issues in halacha. The machine, if you ever go to matzah bakery, machine matzah bakery, it's one continuous assembly line with no stop in the middle. On the other hand, particularly the matzah that we eat by the Seder, where we're baking that matzah to fulfill the mitzvah of eating matzah by the Seder, and the eating of matzah by the Seder is a mitzvah d'oraisa. So the matzah has to be made l'shem matzah's mitzvah. So a human being, as they're baking the matzah, doing the various activities in the baking of the matzah, if you go to a hand matzah bakery, you'll hear them announce l'shem matzah's mitzvah. They're doing it to fulfill the mitzvah. Whereas when you're baking with a machine, there's obviously, a machine doesn't have any feeling or any brains. And the l'shem matzah's mitzvah is only done when the operator begins the process. So there, some were concerned that isn't considered a real l'shem mitzvah when the machine is doing the work, and the machine obviously can't have that type of intention. And that's why there are people who, even though they eat machine matzah on Pesach, because they say it's 100% kosher, but since for the Seder, we want to have matzah, which is the l'shem matzah's mitzvah, many people eat hand matzahs at the Seder, even though they don't eat the hand matzah the rest of Yontif. The other issue that comes up is the processing of the flour. Most machine matzahs, the flour that's used for the matzah is not cut. The grain is not cut l'shem matzah. It's only later when you start making the grain into flour, that's when all the activity is watched, that it shouldn't be chametz, it should be used for matzah. And there are people that want that from the earlier stage of the preparation of the flour, of the grain for the matzah, it should be done l'shem matzah's mitzvah. And therefore the flour that's used for the hand matzahs is flour that was already cut, l'shas tzira, it was cut l'shem matzah, whereas the flour that was typically used for machine matzah, there are exceptions, but it has to be very clear on that box. A machine matzah is not cut l'shem matzah. So therefore, again, in terms of the lack of human intervention, which could be an advantage in the preparation of the matzah, that's an advantage the machine matzah comes with. On the other hand, particularly l'shem matzah's mitzvah is much better fulfilled with your hand matzah, and also hand matzah has the advantage that it was shomer, it was prepared from the cutting, l'shem mitzvah's matzah.
So thank you back for the great explanation between the difference between the hand and the machine. What would be the shear that a person needs to fulfill his chiyuv of both hand and or machine?
So when we talk about a hand matzah, a kazayas, and again, these are not exact sciences, what I'm going to tell you. But I'm going to interject before I answer you, Rabbi Elef, with a story that I tell my children every year by the Seder. I'm not sure it's going to happen this year because of what's going on. But every year by the Seder, I tell my children that I had a great, great uncle. His name was Rabbi Moshe Steinberg. He was the brother of, he lived in the west side of Manhattan. And he told me, this goes back obviously a very long time, during World War I, his family was from Poland, from Galicia, and many of the Polish Jews took refuge in Vienna during World War I. He said, my great-great-great-grandfather was a world-famous Pesach. His name was the Machs Avram, Rav Avram Steinberg. And during that year of World War I in Vienna, in the Seder, there were many great Rabbonim who were together in Vienna and celebrated the Seder that year together. There was my great-great-grandfather, the Machs Avram. There was Rabbi Yosef Engel. There was Rameh Arik. These were the greatest Paiskim, Gedolei Harabonim of that generation. And my uncle was a young boy at his grandfather's Seder, and he used to tell me these were the greatest Paiskim. Their Shuvas farm, their Svarm are the Svarm by which we live till this very day. He said, nobody sat at the Seder with a ruler, and nobody sat at the Seder with a stopwatch. Nobody acted at the Seder as if this is some sort of a exact science. Because he says he didn't think that's what Hashem wanted from us at the Seder. When we eat the matzah, Hashem wants us to think about what the matzah represents. When we eat the maror, Hashem wants us to think about what the maror represents. Not about, did I eat a millimeter too much, or did I eat a millimeter too little? However, having said that, of course, we are a nation of halacha, and halacha gives us rules, and rules tell us how much we should eat and shouldn't, how much we have to eat to fulfill the mitzvah. So a kazayas of a hand matzah is approximately a third of a matzah. A kazayas of a mishim matzah is approximately between 2/3 and 3/4 of a matzah. So now, when we eat the matzah, so we all remember we actually make two brachas. We make a hamoitzi lechem in haaretz, and we make an achilas matzah. And therefore, there are many poskim who suggest that we have to eat two kazaisim. There are poskim that say you don't have to eat two kazaisim. So you could be lenient and strict at the same time. You don't have to take a whole full third of a hand matzah for each kazayis. That would mean you have to eat a whole 2/3 of a matzah. If you eat less than 2/3 of a matzah, it's still a little less than 2/3 of a matzah, you're fine for moitzi matzah. And when you're eating if you're using mishim matzah, I think if you're eating a whole matzah, a whole mishim matzah, you can be yaitz to the mitzvah moitzi matzah. When it comes for kairech, we remember that we eat the maror and the matzah together. There, again, you should eat about a third of a hand matzah and about 2/3 to 3/4 of a mishim matzah.
Okay, so once we're dealing with the
one more point. Rafi Kaiman, there you should eat a full third of the hand matzah and a full 3/4 of the mishim matzah.
So once we're dealing with the shiurim, what would be the shiur in terms of mara? And then maybe a little explanation: should one be using the chrein, the white horseradish? Should one be using romaine lettuce? What's preferable, and what would be the shiur for those?
So your listeners by now will know my first answer. My first answer is what's preferable is whatever is your minute. Whatever is your custom, that's what's preferable. Having said that that's what's preferable, now the Mishnah in Perek Arvei Psachim, in Masechet Psachim, does mention a number of vegetables which can be used for maror. And the first is chazeres, and most explain that chazeres is romaine lettuce. And that's why romaine lettuce is certainly very preferable. However, when I say that romaine lettuce is preferable, it means that we have to be very, very careful that the romaine lettuce, which we know is very often infested. People tell me, I don't know what you're talking about, Rabbi Elefant. I bought romaine lettuce and I didn't see anything. If you bought romaine lettuce, not the pre-checked romaine lettuce, and you didn't see anything, that means you didn't check it properly. And in halacha, this is not a Pesach halacha, it's a year-round halacha. Kashrus halacha is very sensitive to infestation, that we're not allowed to eat anything that has any worms or ants or any living creature on it. So you have to make sure that the romaine lettuce you use is properly cleaned. Most poskim are of the opinion that many use, and we strongly recommend that there are some very good romaine lettuce available that are pre-checked with very reliable supervision. The OU itself gives hashgacha to quite a few brands. So if you're going to use romaine, use that, the pre-checked. Erev Pesach is busy enough that you shouldn't have to be worried about checking romaine lettuce. And a kazayas of romaine lettuce is the area that fills about 3 inches by 5 inches. That's considered a kazayas of moror. And you have to have a kazayas of moror for when you do the mitzvah moror. And then you have to have a kazayas of moror. A small kazayas is fine for that, for when you're eating kairich, the matzah and the moror together. But many people have the minig, as you mentioned, Rabbi Elef, not to use romaine lettuce. They use horseradish. Now, it's very important. For some reason this year particularly, I'm getting a number of calls about this. When we speak about horseradish, you know, the horseradish that you buy in the store, the prepared beets that they also happens to be called horseradish because they mix horseradish together with your beets. That's not horseradish, and that's not kosher for moror. It's kosher to eat with your gefilte fish, but it shouldn't be used for moror. Moror means that you have the horseradish root that is ground into a powder or flakes, and that's moror. The amount that you should use, the amount that's considered a kazayas, is anywhere from 0.7 fluid ounces to 1.1 fluid ounces. Again, for the mitzvah moror, you should probably use 1.1 fluid ounces, and for the mitzvah of kairich, you could use less.
Okay, thank you with regards to moror. One other question that came up is people are afraid of supplying the stores, perhaps of moror, the conventional types, the romaine and the horseradish. Is there any other types of vegetables that one could use for moror if those two are not available?
So I want to first say that I don't believe that there's going to be any shortage in either of those two types of moror. We have been in contact with the people who are the manufacturers of what I mentioned a moment ago, the pre-checked moror, and they're telling us that there's going to be plenty of the pre-checked romaine lettuce available. We're also being told that the horseradish root, there will be plenty available. And certainly, if not something I'm strongly recommending, but if you can't find the pre-checked romaine lettuce, then you could buy regular romaine lettuce and just check it properly. You could refer to the OU Kosher web that gives you directions on how to check romaine lettuce. But if neither are available, the other option that many people can use are endives. There are people that use endives tomorrow, so if you can't find the other types, I could recommend endives. And I even remember that I heard many years ago that Rabbi Aaron Kotler, in the times of Rabbi Aaron Kotler, certainly they didn't have the pre-checked romaine that we enjoy nowadays. That Rabbi Aaron Kotler held that with the average you could even use regular lettuce for moror. So I'm not in any way suggesting that that's what you should do. I don't think regular lettuce is should be used lechatchila as maror, but if that's what happens, that you won't be able to find any of what's known as maror, that means the romaine lettuce or the horseradish or the endives, then if you have no other option, I guess you could use regular lettuce.
Okay, we're going to kind of pivot over here from talking about the actual food products at the Seder to, in the last few minutes that we have to make the most of it. A lot of people are concerned, especially with the coronavirus pandemic that's going on, about medications and things like that. So, is there anything that you could recommend in terms of medications this year for Pesach, cough suppressants or the like that people will be able to use?
Okay, so I want to talk about medicine. Before we go into specific medicines, I want to talk about medicine in general. The halacha is, and this is, I guess, if any year we need to speak about it, this is the year we should be speaking about it. The Torah gave us mitzvahs that we should be healthy. The Torah wants us to be healthy. That's the first mitzvah the Torah wants us to focus on. There are very few situations where the observance of a mitzvah or the doing an avera supersedes one's health. So therefore, I get many questions about different medicines that people have to take and what should they do on Pesach. And my response, very, very firmly, is that if you have a chronic disease, and I want to explain what I mean when I say you have a chronic disease. It doesn't mean, chas v'sholem, you're laid up in the hospital. And if you're laid up in the hospital, then of course you're just gonna take whatever they give you. But you have a chronic disease, someone Rahman has a heart condition, hypertension, diabetes, cancer, and they have to take medicines. My recommendation to you, not my recommendation, my directive to you is take the medicine that you're supposed to take. Just take it. If, however, you are not in such a chronic situation, or even if you are in a chronic situation, but you have an option, and you can take a medicine which is a pill that you just swallow, or you could take a medicine which is a pill that you chew, or a liquid that you drink. The best always is, unless it's certified for Pesach, the best always is to take something that you just swallow. Because that's something that's like derech achilasai. You're not eating it, you're not chewing it, you're just swallowing it. And that's the most preferable. If, however, the medicine that you need to take is not available in that type of a form, and again, if it's a chronic situation, so then do what you have to do. But if it's not a chronic situation, and it's not available in a pill form, then that's something you may want to consider avoiding on Pesach. So going back to your point, Rabbi Elef, in this year of the coronavirus, if people are being instructed to take different medicines, they're being instructed to take cough medicine, our information is that the Robitussin doesn't have any trace in it. We're not 100% sure about the chametz status, but again, if you need to take it because it's a chronic situation, follow the advice that I just gave you. A pill that you swallow is best, next a pill that you chew, and next a liquid that you drink.
So once we're talking about medications, things that go into your mouth, there's been a lot of questions about toothpaste, mouthwash, lipsticks, and the like. What's the story with that? Can people use? Do they need to be kosher Pesach? What can they use on Pesach in that regard?
So again, my personal feeling, I shouldn't say my personal feeling, because my personal feeling is not that important. Rabbi Belsky felt this way as well. If at all possible, if you have toothpaste or mouthwash that is kosher for Pesach, and there are more and more brands that are manufacturing toothpaste and mouthwashes that are kosher for Pesach, our recommendation is that's what you should buy for Pesach. The toothpaste is going into your mouth. The mouthwash is going into your mouth. We're so careful, I think tonight's program is a testimony to that, how we're so careful about everything that we ingest on Pesach. So we're going to be so careful about everything we ingest on Pesach, this should be no different. And we should be very careful, if possible, to get toothpaste or mouthwash with a supervision for Pesach. If, however, they are not available, I have here Rabbi Bess's guide that he puts out every year, and he's kind enough to share with us with his recommendations. And there are quite a number of toothpaste that he says he's investigated and refined for Pesach. All the AIM products, the Aquafresh products, the Colgate products, the Orajel products, the Prevident products. So those, he says, he's checked. They don't have special for Pesach supervision, but he says he's checked them and they're all acceptable to be used for Pesach. The same when it comes to mouthwash. He also has some mouthwashes that he has checked here on page 42 that he says are acceptable for Pesach. Again, just to list some of them, he has the Arm & Hammer products, the Listerine products, Scope, and Orajel as different products that he's recommending as mouthwash that can be used on Pesach. Again, my personal feeling, and this was the opinion that we who had the privilege of working together and learning by Rabbi Belsky, that if you could buy a product with a kosher supervision for Pesach, that would be even more preferable.
So a couple more questions just came in right now about some of the medications. Are there any prenatal medications, prenatal pills that we're recommending?
Yes, the OU, in conjunction with Maxi Health, certifies the small prenatal caps for Pesach, but you have to make sure that the container you purchase has a sticker that says it's chametz free.
And then another question someone wants to know is, you mentioned taking swallowable pills when they're chronic. What about someone is not chronically ill but wants to take swallowable pills?
So again, if it's not a chronic situation and it's a swallowable pill and the doctor is recommending that you take it, there's room for leniency.
Okay, we're just going to go to one question about kashering that came up over here, and then, looks like we're almost running out of time for this part. A lot of people, it's hard to make Pesach. A lot of people, especially that are in the demographic that have tuned in tonight, are in small apartments and the like. Normally we say for Ashkenazim that they can't kosher glass. Is there any svaras to say they could be lenient this year and be able to kosher glass that was used with chametz?
So again, as you correctly indicate, Rabbi Elef, people of Ashkenazic custom don't kosher glass for Pesach. Sfardim do kosher glass for Pesach. The two leniencies that I would recommend, if you know for a fact that your glass, the people that called me, that they have special wine glasses, that they know that they only use for wine a whole year, and they don't put any other liquid, nothing hot, nothing cold, nothing chametz. So I'm not ready to take it on my shoulders, but I could see room for some leniency. What I can recommend is if you need to use your glass that you have, your chametz glass, and you want to use that for Pesach, what you could do is called mili ve'ilui. Soak the glasses in water for 24 hours, then change the water, and then do that again for 24 hours, and then do the third time for 24 hours, and then even people of Ashkenazic descent could use those glasses for Pesach. Reality-wise, my personal recommendation is that there's too much to do before Pesach. There's no reason to change, as I keep on repeating tonight, your custom, and you can buy very nice disposable glasses nowadays and use that for Pesach and avoid the question.
Okay, couple similar questions that came in are, if someone usually has a water cooler in their kitchen, can they use that cooler on Pesach? Has both a hot and cold nozzle, and maybe in a similar way, if I have a flower vase on the chametz table, could I use that as well?
So in terms of the spigot, in terms of the water cooler, what I recommend is that if you only use it for cold, it's fine. But if you don't only use it for cold, especially the spigot, the part where the water comes out, you need to be concerned that, let's say I had something hot that was chametz, and I was filling it up from my cooler, so that spigot might have become chametzig, and you should kasher it. Now, the OU's position is that a plastic spigot can be kashered. Moshe Feinstein's position was that plastic should not be kashered. So if you could get a new spigot for Pesach, that would be best. If you can't get a new spigot, then just pour over it boiling water, and you could use it for Pesach.
Okay, it looks like we're out of time over here. Rabbi Elefant, I want to thank you very, very much. Wishing you a Chag Kosher Sameach. And thank you for sharing these insights with the Olam, especially that's here in Queens, where a lot of them are making Pesach for the first time.
It's our pleasure, Rabbi Elef. You deserve all the credit for putting this together with your colleagues in Queens. And we should all, whatever minute we follow, have the same goal this year, Pesach. We should all have in mind, by the Seder, we say, V'nitzak al Hashem Elokeinu v'seinu. We all announced that in Mitzrayim, it was already unbearable. And we cried out, V'nitzak, we cried out al Hashem Elokeinu v'seinu, to Hashem, the God of our fathers. V'yishma Hashem es kaleinu. And Hashem heard our prayers. So my recommendation to everybody who's listening, or you could share this with your friends and your family, as we sit at the Seder, and we get to that point of the Seder, whether you're just sitting by the Seder yourself, or just you and your wife, or much limited group than other years, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't need a large audience. The Nitzach, at that moment of the Seder, stop, close your eyes, and daven to Hashem. Hashem, listen to our prayers. Look at the tzaras that we are suffering in this horrible pandemic. But just like in the time of Yetzias Mitzrayim, we cried and you listened. Listen to us again, Hashem. Listen to our prayers that come from the depths of our hearts, and bring a tremendous Yeshua to all of us, to all of Klal Yisrael, to all of mankind, so that we should be able to appreciate you, love you, and worship you in good health.
Amen. Thank you very much, Rabbi Elefant.
Good night.
So now we're going to go to Chaim Schwartz, Executive Vice President of the Vaad of Queens, who is coming to us live from his kitchen with the nice VHG sign, who will be now going through some ways to kosher your kitchen, your house, your kelim for Pesach. Chaim, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay, first and foremost, I'd like to thank my wife for giving me her kitchen on a busy Sunday night before Pesach and allowing us to take it over and to show you how to kosher. I also want to thank the video producer and director, my son Shmuley, who's on the other side of the camera. I want to thank Rabbi Elef and Rabbi Sigal for putting this together. And I also, of course, want to give my biggest thanks to Rabbi Elefant for giving the share he gave, and to hear his voice again, as I have every year before Pesach, when the OU has their Erev Pesach shiurim and things that come out. And unfortunately, it has to be in the setting, but Baruch Hashem, we're able to, modern technology, come together. So the first problem that one faces, especially those that have never made Pesach before, is the anxiety and the panic of kashering for Pesach. I just want to tell you, don't have anxiety, don't have panic. If Chazal told us and Shulchan Aruch tells us the halachas that you can kasher and tells us what to do, so that means you can do it too. You're all capable of doing it. The most important thing is to do it when you're calm, and to do it when you're ready to do it, and to do it when nothing else is happening. You need full attention, and you need to be ready to do it well and safely. Safety is the utmost importance when it comes to kashering. I can tell you from all the years of kashering in different places, the scars and bruises and burns, and it does not have to be that way. You can do it slowly, carefully, calmly, and unfortunately this year we have a lot of time, so we can really do it right. We're not in a rush. So the first thing I want to direct your attention to is to the ubiquitous oven that everybody here has. We can get our videographer to check. So of course over here we have an oven. It's a Hot Point made by GE. And how are we doing over here? We got it? And this is a self-clean oven. In order to get a self-clean oven ready for Pesach, all one has to do is hit the self-clean button, press start, and then let it go. That will kosher your oven. That will kosher your oven, and that will make it kosher to Pesach. We'll turn that off over here. Now, before you do the self-clean oven, it's very important that you want to make sure that the air in the kitchen is ventilated. It's probably a good idea to make sure that the children are not around, because there will be fumes coming up. Open the back door, open your kitchen windows, make sure that there's a lot of ventilation because it will get a little bit greasy. The smell will come up, the fumes will come out. It's not so geschmack, it's not so much fun. You want to do it in a time when the kids are not going to be in the kitchen. You want to make sure that there is good ventilation. Now, what happens if a person does not have a self-clean oven, which is in Queens? I know there's a lot of young couples, especially in Kehilas Torah Tamima, which is a co-sponsor, and there's been a lot of questions what to do with a non-self-clean oven. So it's very, very easy. What you want to do is you want to get into the oven. We can just pan over here. Make sure you take out the shelves. You want to use either Samaritz or Easy Off. I recommend Samaritz. It has less fumes. Easy Off is very heavy on the lungs, and especially what's going on right now with the COVID-19, which is an upper respiratory infection. Maybe it's better to stay away from it. You want to take out the shelves. You want to clean them well. Do it over the sink or take them outside on the porch if you have one. Wipe them down well. This is your best friend when it comes to cleaning shelves, a shmata. You want to use the shmata, you want to clean it well. You want to clean the glass here in the oven. You want to clean the inside of the oven as well as possible. And then what you're going to do is we're going to turn the oven on as high as it goes, if it's 450 or 500. We in the Vaad, we recommend at least 2 hours to do it. If there's a broil setting, you can leave that on as well and let it go for about 2 hours. Then you'll be kosher. Now, there is a machlekes haposkim what to do about the glass. Rabbi Welcher has told me that he prefers that, and the psak that we have is that the glass be covered if you do not have a self-cleaning oven. And that's because the self-cleaning oven will kosher the glass extensively, but a non-self-cleaning oven, it won't necessarily get everything kosher. So therefore, after you kosher the oven, or actually before you kosher the oven, you want to take heavy duty aluminum foil, and you want to cover the glass. Make sure the aluminum foil comes around to the front, tape it down here, and then you're ready to go. Now, a lot of people are able to buy new silverware for the Yom Tiv. A lot of people are not. So how do you kosher silverware? So let's go to the videotape. Let's go right here. If you see, this is a pot. Now this is a chametz pot. If I want to take a chametz pot and kosher silverware in it, I first have to kosher the chametz pot. So we've already started here with the pot and we put the water in. But the first thing a person has to do, anytime you're koshering something which needs either libon or hagala, and I was remiss leaving out about the oven, that the oven has to be clean and then it has to be left for 24 hours, unless you're doing a self-clean. A self-clean is a libon gomer. Libon gomer does not need 24 hours because everything's getting burned. So again, let me go over that. If you're doing a libon gomer, you don't need 24 hours of a clean oven. If you're not doing a libon gomer, you're doing a non-self-clean oven, which is really a libon kal, you have to clean the oven, let it sit for 24 hours, and then you can run it at the highest temperature for 2 hours, 2.5 hours. When it comes to koshering kalim, it comes to koshering silverware. So what we want to do with that is, we want to first, if we're going to take a chametz pot, we have to kosher the chametz pot. We have to clean the pot, make sure it's 100% clean, let it sit for 24 hours, make sure it's dry, and then we have to put hot water, the way you see it right now, and boil it in the pot. We have the pot. Now, right now, as you see, the water is boiling. That's called mala avabuis. That means it's a rolling boil. The water is coming up. Just having a boil on the bottom of the pot is not enough. You have to have mala avabuis. The bubbles have to be rising, have to be continuously coming up and going down, coming up and going down. Now, just getting the water in here is not enough. I need to get the water over the sides, and I need to use it. I need to be able to get the whole pot kosher. So what a person can do is you could take a rock, or there's something that they sell, they may have in gift world or others from, if you can get there, from their mitzvah, and that's this, which is a Evan Malubin. It's a hot stone, and what you're going to do is you're going to put it in, and what that does is it gets the water to go over the sides. Now that the water went over the sides, now it's kosher. Now it's kosher. Excuse me. So now that we kosher the pot, a chametz pot. So now we can go to kosher the silverware. Now, if a person wants to use a Pesach thicker pot, like we have over here, a Pesach thicker pot, so then all one has to do is fill it, let the water bubble, and then you do the following procedure. As you can tell, we got the water bubbling again. We can just get the, do we have that bubbling there? So what you want to do is you want to take the spoon or the fork or the knife, whatever it is, one by one. Again, make sure it's clean and it has to be used in 24 hours. It has to be 100% clean. It has to be dry. And then what you do is you drop it into the water. Now it's kosher. Now it's kosher. Making sure when you're doing all of your silverware that that water has to be mala avabois. That bubbles, those bubbles have to keep on coming up. If it's not bubbling, if it's just like this, and let's here give an example, this is not good enough for kashering. This is not considered mala avabois. This is mala avabois. As you can see, that the water is rising. After a person's done with that, halacha tells us that the water, that the kalim have to go, and they have to be poured into hot water, into cold water, excuse me, rinsed in cold water. So you'll pour out the kashering water, and then you'll rinse it with cold water, and now it's kosher l'pesach. Let's talk about the countertops and the sinks. So now there are, I've seen many ways and ideas when it comes to koshering sinks. Unfortunately, not everybody has it correct, and I hope to be able to give it to you in the best way possible. The most important thing is to do it the right way and to do it the safe way. Many people don't know what the right way is, and if they know what the right way is, they don't know what the safe way is. Now, you might notice that I'm wearing gloves. These are something called linesman's gloves. They're very expensive. Linesman's gloves are gloves for electric workers that are going on the lines, you know, the cherry pickers that you'll see in the electric lines above. This is called the linesman's glove, and it can withstand X amount of watts or X amount of volts going through, when they're up there on the lines. So they're called linesman's gloves. In industrial koshering, we'll stick our hand into the water because we have heavy equipment that needs to be kosher, or heavy things that you can't just drop in. You have to push in. One other thing that I wanted to point out, and I'm sorry I left it out, is if you to koshering the pot, when koshering a pot, and you want to kosher the top. So what one does is you have the rolling boil, and then you take the cover, and in the hot water, you slowly go around, and that should kosher the whole thing. Then you put it upside down, you've got the top. Now, how do I kosher a sink? How do I kosher a sink, a countertop? Many people don't realize that when I kosher the kiluach, which means the water that's being poured out of the spout, the kiluach is what koshers. So let me give an example. If I koshering with a kumkum kashmali, this is this is used for coffee, a hot water heater. So this is the best thing to use, and the reason is because if you look inside, you'll see that there's a hot water element, there's the metal element. That element suffices as a Evan Malubin. Evan Malubin means a hot stone that we used before. And that hot stone, we're worried that when the water comes off the fire, it cools down. So what we want to make sure is that the water stays hot. And also, the halacha tells us because of davar gush, something which was a solid might have touched the sink or the countertop. So therefore, we have to be able to make sure that the water is hot enough, that it's boiling, and that we'll be able to get the right koshering. So now, when you're koshering the whatever it is you're koshering the stovetop, you're koshering the sink. The kiluach, whatever the kiluach touches, that's what gets koshers. The water that runs down is not what koshers the sink. So therefore, if we're looking at the countertop, it's only the kiluach. Where I've done the kiluach, that's where the koshering is taking place. So therefore, a person, if they're koshering, the fact that the water runs down past where you poured the initial pouring on, that's not the kashering. The sink doesn't get kashered or the countertop doesn't get kashered. The kashering only happens when there is the kiluach, where the water coming out, where that hits the actual surface. So therefore, one has to make sure that he gets every single part of the stovetop or of the sink. Now, that also goes for the backstop, for the backdrop. I got the name right. So if you're going to do it here, this is how you do it. You would pour it down, so that now you're able to get the kiluach on each part of it. We're able to do that? Here, should I do it again? The kiluach on each part. Of course, one must make sure that water is going to come down. Make sure you have towels already. Now, as we go to a sink, what I find the best thing to do with the sink is that if you're able to have this from their mitzvah that makes this, so then this is the best thing. And that's because what ends up happening is that getting the whole sink is very hard. So what the eitzah is, if you take this, you can do it, you pour it over. Now, if you'll see, the water went all over the sink. And now I got a very good kashering. I got an Eroy on the sink, on an Ev Malubin, which touched every part. By the way, the strainer that you have in the sink, this of course is just a demonstration, but the strainer that you have in the sink, which is chametz stick, is not something which can be kashered. You have to get a new one for Pesach. What happens if you don't have one of these things? And what happens if you don't have one of these things? So if you're allowed to go outside, the best thing to do is to go, you have a, what do we call this again? Not a wrench, whatever it is. Pliers, take the pliers. You'll heat up the stone. You'll be able to heat up the stone with your pliers. Make sure you have gloves, some sort of gloves. This is going to be very, very hot. Don't touch it with your hands. Hold it out, and then you'll be able to either pour with your kumkum chashmali, with your hot water, or you'll be able to pour with this. Now, I've seen that people, what they'll do is they made videos using this to pour with. It's very difficult to pour with two hands and to get it right and to get it everywhere. The best thing to do is where you have a handle and you're not touching the actual pot, you're not touching the actual water, and the handle, especially if you have a pot like this where it's a little bit wide, so now you're able to get more of an area to capture. Especially if you have this. So now what it does is it'll spray the water around and you'll have a better way of kashering. Finally, when it comes to kashering the sink, you want to always start, if you don't have the stone, you want to start from the bottom. You want to start from the bottom and then work your way up. So that way you know two things. Number one, you know that you've kashered the bottom. Number two, what ends up happening is that the kashered area, by the time this hot water comes down, it's cool already, and it's not going to affect the kasher area, and you're taken care of. One last thing that a person has to know is about the spout. So this spout has a plastic edge at the end, has a plastic aerator at the end. This is very hard to kasher and very hard to get clean. So what we do is we remove it for Pesach, take it off, and we have a new one. You can go on Amazon. I'm sure Amazon has all the parts for your sink. And you can get on Amazon, you can go and get it. This year it might not be so easy, but in most years, be able to go and get a new one. If you can't, or you have a regular spout that has an aerator on it. So what you want to do is the following. You want to take the water that you kasher with. You want to pour it over the sink. Again, making sure the kiluach hits every part. And then, with the water still bubbling, you want to put the aerator, the spout, into the water, into the pot where the water is bubbling. And now you have a good kashering for everything here in the kitchen. It's not as hard as it looks. It's very, very easy. And It's very, very easy. But the most important thing is to be safe, to be calm, to do it in a time where you're ready to do it. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with us. My cell phone number is 347-680-2603. Again, 347-680-2603. Or you can reach me at cschwartz@queensvaad.org. Again, cschwartz@queensvaad.org. And just want to wish everybody a very happy and healthy Kosher Sameach. For those of you who are doing it for the first time, we all had to do it the first time. We all had to make your face off the first time. It's the first time for everything. And the most important thing is that you should be safe, you should be healthy and happy. The phone number again is 347-680-2603, 347-680-2603. I hope it was clear. Hope everybody was able to see how to kasher for Pesach. And again, my bracha and my wish is hatzlacha to everybody. What's that? Stovetop? Yes. A question about a stovetop. Okay.
Actually, Chaim, if you don't mind, there's a whole bunch of questions that we can, if you have a couple minutes that we'd like to go through.
Sure. If you could just fix this over here.
Okay.
Noise. I'm not exactly sure what's
So
going
the
on.
first one was people wanted to know about kashering the stovetop. How do you kasher the stovetop? Does it need to be covered? What about the knobs?
One second here. I'm not exactly sure what's going on here, but anyway, so the stovetop and knobs. So the best thing to do is that a person should, the stovetop over here, you cannot kosher. This is ceramic, it can't be kosher. So what you want to do is you want to cover it with foil. Now you want to make sure that when you cover it with foil, that you leave the area around the burners open. If you're not going to leave the area around the burners open, first of all, the oven probably it has a safety feature. The stove will not work, and you will not be able to use the oven. The second thing that you want to make sure is you want to make sure that the grates. If you have thank you for reminding me, Rabbi El. If you have a self-clean oven, so the grates should go into the oven before the self-clean cycle, and that will capture the grates. If you do not have a self-clean oven, so the best thing to do, and again, I've heard a lot of misinformation about this because it can get very dangerous. The best thing to do is turn each of them on, and I suggest you do it one at a time. Turn each of them on and let them go for about 15 minutes. Now, I have heard about Poskim telling people to cover it with aluminum foil. I'm very nervous to suggest that, and that's because if a person does not know what they're doing, you can make chas v'shalom a tremendous amount of damage. The best thing to do is to turn it on as high as it goes, let it go as high as it goes for about 15 minutes, and 15 or 20 minutes, and that will kosher it. Again, my suggestion is each one is separate. Now, where you have a small one, like here in the rear, so the only thing I can really suggest is to maybe take a small piece of foil. Make sure that when you take that small piece of foil and you cover it, make sure it gets kosher. You cover it in the following manner. You watch it, but also you want to make sure that you ventilate it, put holes in it. And in that way, you're able to kosher the grates. Okay, Rabbi Elef, more questions?
Yeah, several more questions. Once we're
No problem.
on the creating, a lot of people come through. I just want to try to go in order over here. In terms of the self-cleaning oven, people wanted to know, do you have to cover over the glass door if you use self-clean? And some people have heard that you're supposed to do a self-clean and then a second self-clean.
Right. So with the self-clean, once you do one self-clean, you don't have to do another self-clean. There's no requirement to do that. You've done a Liban Gomer, and that's enough. There are people, there are Nashim Tzakanias that have the minhag to do one self-clean or two self-cleans. Of course, as Rabbi Elefant said previously, if a person has the minhag to do it, or their mother does it, so then they should do what their mother does. But in the halacha, it's not necessary. Yes. Glass stovetops, yeah. Glass stovetops. So it's the feeling of many poskim that glass stovetops, you should turn on each area in the stovetop. Turn it on, wait till it gets red, get it as high as it can, wait till it gets red, and as soon as it gets red, then that's going to be enough. One has to be very careful that when they are koshering a glass stovetop, that they don't use the area that's not going to be kosher. In other words, that nothing that like a pot doesn't go into like this area of the glass stovetop for two reasons. Number one, because it wasn't kosher. Number two, because if you're going to have liquid that gets inside, that's going to be righted in an area where where it's treif, and there you have righted, kela negas klib and righted be'emtza, and then you have a problem of treif and chametz. You want to be careful. There is a product on Amazon which they sell, which is a metal. It's like a metal little plate that you can put on top of that area, and you can put your pot on top. I've heard that it's not as effective in conducting the heat, but if a person is worried about that, you can certainly get that.
Another question that people have been asking is, what about the knobs? Do they need to be covered over on the stove?
So the knobs should be covered. The best thing to do really is to get new knobs. Today you can also go on Amazon, you can get new knobs. I'm not saying it's mitzad din you have to do it, but it's certainly something which is laudable. What we do is here, we take them off, we put them into like a cup, or we put them into like the chametz stick netilas yadayim cup, and we'll put them there with bleach. We'll let them sit for about an hour or two. It gets all the grime off. Then what you can do is, if you don't want to get new ones, you can take foil, put a hole in, stick it on, and then you're good to go. Another thing I want to point out is that the minhag ha'olam is to cover as much as you can. Anything which is exposed during the year, you want to cover. So therefore, when it comes to, like, let's say the handle here on the oven, you want to cover that as well. Why is that? Again, because the minhag ha'olam is that anything which is exposed during the year, you want to cover. A lot of people have the minhag also that even though they kosher the spout, they cover it as well because it's exposed during the year. They'll cover this, the handle for the sink as well. A lot of people will cover the handle to the refrigerator as well. I remember one time when I was first cutting my teeth in kashrus industry, I was talking about before, the OU used to have every year before they had webinars. Every year there was a question and answer with the postum of the OU. I used to come in from Boston, and I remember Rav Belsky once saying that there's nothing more beautiful in a Jewish home on Pesach than walking into a kitchen and saying everything covered, even though it's not the regular, household way of having a kitchen present itself. But on Pesach, it's a hidur. It's a beautiful thing, Mikam Yisrael, that you have everything covered and taped, and there's plastic everywhere. That's a hidur for Pesach. Yes. Any other questions?
So people are also asking, do you need to clean the grates before you turn them on the stove?
You're talking about the top grates?
Yep.
Yeah. So for sure you have to clean the grates. Otherwise, you're going to have yourself a grease fire. Now, most of the time they are clean. If you look at the grates over here, we haven't particularly cleaned them for this presentation, but you'll see that the grates are not terribly dirty, and that would be enough to turn on the fire, and you can get it going.
And you'd also mentioned about putting the grates in self-cleaning oven. So someone wanted to know, is it all of the grates, or is it even the burners should be put into the self-cleaning oven?
No, the burners do not need to be put in self-cleaning oven. You'll probably you're talking about the burners, these burners?
Yeah,
the middle?
The guys in the inside.
No, they're continuously getting kosher. Also, if you put them into the self-clean, you will ruin them. You will destroy them.
And does anything need to be done with the vent above the stove and the backsplash of the stove?
Oh, I'm very good. Very, very good. Thank you for asking that question. So in my kitchen over here, you'll notice that we have the microwave, which is above the oven. Now, what happens is that the grease goes up. I don't know if you want to show this. 1 second. The grease goes up. So what we do is I clean it out, and then what I'll do is I'll take heavy-duty Reynolds wrap. We'll put it underneath, and then we'll tape it up. Why is that? Because it's very hard to get into this the vent on top of the oven. There's a lot of grease that's always going up. And it's very hard to get it clean. And the problem is on Pesach, we don't want that the hummus, that the grease should come in to the food that we're cooking. So what you do is you take heavy-duty foil, you put it here. Now, that comes with the problem. The problem is if you have a small kitchen and it gets very hot, so then chas v'shalom, it can lead to sakana. So the best thing to do is if you're going to put foil up here, you have to make sure that, again, that you ventilate it. Make sure there's holes in it so that there is a fan in here. And you want to make sure that it's ventilated enough that the fan will be able to work.
So someone else also wanted to know is, will an oven thermometer get kosher while the oven is being kosher, or do I need a new oven thermometer for Pesach?
So a person should always buy a new oven thermometer before Pesach.
And people want to know about covering the countertops. Do you have to kosher them and then cover them, or would it just be enough to cover the countertops and I have to kosher them?
I'm sorry, ask that question again?
Again, people are asking, can I just cover the countertops instead of koshering them, or do they have to be koshered and then covered?
No, absolutely. So that's a very good question. So
once you're on that topic, how do you kosher? If I formica countertops, how do I kosher that formica?
So if you hold it, you can kosher formica, which is a machlokes haposkim. If you hold, you can kosher the formica. So it would be the same. We've done the same way that I showed you right now, with pouring the water over the countertops. However, many people cover the countertops. Personally, I cover the countertops here on Pesach, and they're not exposed. And that's what we do. But even though we do cover the countertops here in our home, we do kosher the countertops first. And there's a very simple reason. And that's because many times the countertops get loose over Pesach. There's water that gets stuck underneath, the tape gets loose. And what happens is that sometimes the countertop can get exposed. If the countertop can get exposed, something can touch it, something hot can touch it. And if it wasn't kosher for Pesach, then you're going to hit a problem. Is it halacha? Is it a terrible chashash? No, it's not. But like Rabbi Elefant said, we want to be machmir on Pesach. We want to try to get every possibility that we can. So therefore, my humble suggestion is that even if you're going to cover the counters, so the best thing is to kosher them as best as you can. Of course, if it's going to be hard for you, if it's an issue for you, if you're not confident in doing it, so then of course covering the countertops is enough.
So the next question is, do you have to kosher your sink if you're using an insert?
So again, it's the same thing. Because if the insert is not always 100% foolproof in making sure that things don't back up. So there, what happens is that you'll have the hot water touching the non-kosherized Pesach sink, the chametz sink, coming back up into your insert. Now, one thing I neglected to say is that when you do kosher your sink, you want to take bleach and pour it down your sink. And that's for the reason I just said, because if there's chametz in there and the hot water hits the chametz, and for any reason there's a backup on Pesach, so then you'll have a problem. If you pour bleach down, so now you've made the chametz, you've soured the chametz, you've made it bad, you've been mevatel the chametz in a way where it's not in a roy lachilas kelev. So now you don't have that issue. My personal feeling, and just from the experience that I've had, Baruch Hashem, making Pesach all these years, is that it's always kedai to kosher as much as you can, even if you're going to cover it, even if you're going to have an insert in the sink, because you want to make sure that if there's a backup, or if the covering for the countertops comes off, then you want to make sure that you're covered. That even if it does touch the countertop, that you do not come into any contact with something which is chametz.
A couple of questions that are coming through. You're standing right in front of your microwave. Can that be kosher for Pesach, and if so, how?
So I don't. I know that Rabbi Rabinowitz made a video about koshering a microwave. I'm not comfortable in suggesting to people to kosher their microwaves, simply because I believe that it really needs to be done very well. It needs to be cleaned very well, and even koshering a plastic microwave is a very big machlokes haposkim. The poskim of the last 50, 60 years, koshering a microwave, they were not so crazy about it. For somebody that has a situation, somebody that again is in an apartment and doesn't have a lot to their disposal to cook with or to heat up with, or whatever your situation may be, you can reach out to me privately and I can try to guide you. I'm not keen on suggesting that one use a microwave on Pesach.
Somebody else wanted to know that. Let me just see what I had over here. Can you use a Okay. How do you kosher a hot plate, especially the techid one?
So I'm not familiar with the techid one. What I will suggest to you is that the best way to kosher a hot plate, if you're going to use it, and if you're able to get it clean, getting it clean is very, very difficult. If you're able to get it clean, so what I've seen that the recommendation is to clean it as best as possible. Make sure all the grease is off. Make sure all the crumbs are off, grease, everything. It's all got to come off. Then you plug it in, cover it with foil, and let it run for an hour, and then it'll be kosher. The same thing is with the blech. My suggestion is to get a new blech for Pesach. If you go to Main Street here in Queens, there's their Wassman's, and I saw in Wassman's, I believe Seasons, Aaron's. They all have it. They're stocked with it. But if you can't get out and get it for whatever reason, again, what you want to do is you want to clean the blech as best as possible. You want to put the blech on top of the stove, and you want to run it for. Again, you got to watch it. But you got to make sure that it gets very, very hot. It starts turning bluish, and making sure that all the grease burns off. If you're going to kosher a blech, you're going to see that as soon as you start turning on the flame to a high temperature, it's going to start smoking. And the reason for that is because there's grease in the blech. It is not koshered until all the smoke comes out, because that is grease. That's hummus stick of grease. So my suggestion is, especially if you're in a small apartment, especially if you don't have a lot of good ventilation, especially if this is your first time, try to get someone to get out and go and get a blech for you, and that's probably your best eitzah. That's probably your best idea.
Okay, a couple questions were if you could recommend how to kosher either a dishwasher or the refrigerator.
Okay, so a refrigerator doesn't need to be kosher in the general sense of the word, in the traditional sense of the word. A refrigerator, what you have to do is you have to take everything out. You have to use some sort of cleaner, a degreaser, or if you have Windex, we got everything here. And you want to take out the shelves, and you want to scrub it down as best as possible. The optimal, as we said earlier, is to cover the shelves, and that way you'll be Pesach-dik. If you don't have anything to cover the shelves with, that's also fine, because the refrigerator is cold. You don't cook in a refrigerator. Same thing with the freezer. You want to take everything out, try to defrost the freezer if you can, clean it well, and then you can put in your Pesach-dik products. Dishwashers. The dishwashers, again, I saw that the OU has a video how to kosher dishwashers. I'm going to refer you to that. I am, again, very, very hesitant to recommend dishwashers, especially dishwashers that have, we'll just move over here. Dishwashers over here, they have a lot of plastic inside of them. I don't know if you can see, but there's a lot of plastic inside of them. There's also a strainer in there that's very hard to kosher. So koshering a dishwasher is not so easy. Again, speak to your local Orthodox rabbi, speak to your Rav if you absolutely need it, and you're not going to be able to do it any other way. My suggestion is that you speak to your Rav and maybe FaceTime him. Maybe he can show you what to do.
Okay, a couple people were asking again, they weren't sure about the backsplash to the stove or putting foil in between the
so you're talking about over here?
Yeah.
Hold on, let's get this one. There you go. So what we'll do is we'll take foil and use this. Step back a little bit. So what you want to do is you want to cover it as best as possible. Now, right under here is where, if I can just get that for a second. Right under here, you'll see the air comes out of there. That's where the fumes come out of the oven. You want to make sure that you don't put any foil under here. You can run your hand underneath where your fingers go in. That's where the fumes come out. That's where the air comes out for the oven. That's the ventilator for the oven. So you don't want to put anything here. See where my hands go in. What you want to do is over here, you want to cover this. Then you'll take a knife. You'll cut out, and you'll be able to see what you need. Don't put plastic over here. If you're going to put plastic over here, a little later you're going to have a fire. You want to make sure this is exposed. Clean it as best as you can, because there is grease. And before you cover it with the, before you do cover it with that, with the foil, You want to clean it as best as possible. Take Windex or take Clorox or whatever it is. Clean it. Make sure that it's 100% clean. Then cover it. Make sure that the window is available to be used. And then you're good to go.
Okay, two last questions to finish up over here. I know everyone's got places to be tonight.
Yes.
Someone wants to know, what does it mean when you say that the sink or countertops can't be used for 24 hours? Does that mean you can't even use it for cold? Should not be used for anything, or could be used for cold?
So it's the best. The lechatchila shouldn't be used for cold. Shouldn't be used for anything. The best thing to do is to prepare other meals that you're going to have. Prepare them in a way where you're not going to be able to use the sink. Or my suggestion is, if you have two sinks, one day the milchiks one, the other one the fleischiks one, or fleischiks and milchiks. And if you have to wash anything cold, if you need to wash anything, you can take it into the bathroom and wash it there. 24 hours means 24 hours not being used. I saw that some of Poskim today suggest turning off the water or turning off the hot water. Now, if you do use it for cold, it's not the end of the world. L'chatchila, it's fine. Even l'chatchila, it's fine. Because the problem is hot. The problem with hot is that hot heat always transfers taste. It always keeps the taste that was there before. So, of course, just to be clear, using cold water is mutter. I don't suggest it, because then what you've done is you've gotten yourself into the mode of using the sink, and we don't want to do that. If you use it for hot water, then let's say you forget, you don't realize, so now you got to start all over again. Or at least you have to call Rav and find out what to do, and you might have shalom bayis issues. So the best thing to do is not to use it at all.
So someone else is asking that if they sometimes use their bathroom sink to wash their chametz dishes, do they need to kasher it if they won't be washing dishes in it on Pesach?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, and we have one other question that came in here. Is that when one's kashering, should they use a Pesach pot or electric kettle to heat it, or could they even use a chametz one?
So like I said before, the best thing to do is to use a Pesach pot. That way, you don't have to kasher the pot. You have a pot that's kosher Pesach, and you're ready to go. Now, in the event, again, that you have to kasher, you have to use a chametz pot. One has to fill it up, like I said. Make sure the water is all the way up. Make sure it's bubbling. Then throw in something hot to make sure that the water goes around the edges to kasher it. And now the pot is kasher, and now you're ready to go. The problem with using a chametz pot is that if you don't kasher it properly, if you haven't kashered it properly, so then the kalim that you kasher in has still remained chametz. You haven't made a Pesach stick, and you're not going to know that you're using chametz kalim on Pesach. So that's why we suggest that you use a Pesach kli, unless you're 100% sure that you know how to use the chametz pot and how to kasher it properly, and then to kasher in there. So my suggestion is to use a Pesach pot.
And we have one last question, and then we're going to stop for the evening. Yitz wanted about kashering flatware. Could you use an aluminum foil pan to kasher flatware?
That's a very, very good question. So again, if you can get the aluminum pan, if you can somehow get it hot enough where the water will be bubbling, so I don't see an issue with that. But the problem is that an aluminum pan is not going to withstand the heat underneath it to get it that hot. But if you can maybe you have a 90-60, those big pans that they have, big heavy duty pans with the kugels that they have, like on Shabbos you go to a kiddush, if that can withstand the heat, then that would be fine.
Okay, Rabbi Schwartz, thank you very much for sharing with your time and expertise. At this point in time, it's about 9:30, so we're going to conclude tonight's presentations. Again,
Thank you again.
To thank everybody for tuning in. Thank you to Rabbi Chaim Schwartz and his Kitchen Q Gardens. And we'd like to thank also Rabbi Ilan Siegelman from Kilas Torah T'miyah for doing a lot of the back-end work today, and Rabbi Moshe Elefant, who presented tonight, Chief Operating Officer of Kosher. Everyone should be well, have a Chag Kosher v'Sameach, stay safe, and Bez Hashem, we should all be together in Israel in time for Pesach.
Amen.